All right, our very last speaker of the conference is Scott Ritt, coming from us from the University of Michigan. Scott received his PhD in behavioral decision sciences from Carnegie Mellon and studies financial decision-making, the role of emotions in decision-making, and a few other aspects of decision-making as well. Without further ado, Scott.
Thank you. So today I'm going to be discussing the way people deal with sadness, specifically, and negative affect in general. And I think this is important because there's lots of things that make us sad. This is kind of a downer to end the conference, sorry about that. But there are lots of things. There's the obvious things, and then there's the more recent things that people talk about. Apparently the holidays make us sad. Facebook, it does a lot of nice things, but it also kind of makes us sad. And of course, there's advertising. We've seen some of this here, the British Airways and Google, although those are more poignant than kind of pure sad. But there's lots of things making us sad. And we can think about how do people deal with it. There's a lot of not very productive ways people deal with it. They ruminate, they overeat, they overdrink. And there's some work suggesting that they spend more. So Jen Lerner and colleagues have work suggesting that when people are sad, their willingness to pay increases. This tendency is known as retail therapy. And the question that we had was, well, does it work? And if you kind of look around as to how it's perceived, it doesn't seem to be, perceived very nicely. Articles like this are not hard to find. When we ask people kind of what's the first thing that come to mind when you hear retail therapy, people are about twice as likely to give us something bad as something good. So it seems like this probably is a bad idea. It doesn't work. But despite this construct, you would think it'd be a lot of big interest to consumer and marketing researchers. There's actually been not a lot of work on it, and the little work that there has been somewhat limited. So there have been selection biases, for example, going to malls and asking people who chose to shop when feeling sad if it helped. These are very particular kinds of people. Maybe they would have healed more quickly anyway. We just don't know. There's no random assignment there. There's also been some imprecision in measurement, so a lot of reliance on the memories of the effects of shopping. Questions like, did you feel better, no different, or worse after making your most recent impulse purchase? You have to figure out what your most recent impulse purchase was, whatever impulse purchase means, and then figure out what after means, like immediately after or like right now. So in our work, we're going to try to provide a more definitive answer to the question, can it work? Can it help to alleviate sadness? And again, we focus on sadness because the prior work suggests that is what gets you, increases your willingness to pay. We want to know, does it work? Is it actually effective? And I should say that we're kind of referring to here and there retail therapy, an occasional episode of retail therapy. We're not talking about kind of intensive 24 hours a day at the mall retail therapy. Intuition suggests that that's probably a bad idea. Our work just doesn't speak to it one way or the other. We kind of are more the on occasion variety. So we can think about why shopping might help to alleviate sadness in the first place. To answer this question, we have to think about how do we view emotions, and there's different ways to view emotions. And we take a common approach, which is the so-called appraisal tendency framework. And the idea here is that the way people cognitively appraise their environment is both a result of emotion, and it also causes that emotion to persist. So it's kind of a negative cycle. And so some common appraisals, is my environment pleasant or unpleasant? Are the things around me predictable or unpredictable? And then there's a control appraisal. Are the outcomes that are happening around me controlled by me, other people, or just kind of ambient external forces, non-human external forces? And this last one is interesting because sadness, more than any emotion, causes people to view outcomes as governed by uncontrollable, outside, external, non-human forces. And critically, these appraisals maintain the experience of sadness. Once you start viewing the world this way, that helps to maintain the experience of sadness. So it's this kind of nasty cycle. And so our thinking is that if we can counteract the cognitive appraisal, we can help to extinguish the emotion that produced it. And so aspects of shopping that restore personal control over the environment, we think that might actually help to alleviate sadness. And so how might shopping restore control? Well, we think choices that are inherent to shopping might help. And shopping is full of choices. Where to shop, what to buy, when to go home, just lots of choices. And in other contexts, choices appear to enhance one's sense of personal control, at least over one's outside environment. So we think that choice might be a nice vehicle for control and help to alleviate sadness that way. Now, certainly there are other ways that shopping might help to alleviate sadness. There might be pleasant distraction. You might get to talk to people. You might buy something that you actually like and consume it. Those all can happen, but they don't have to. We think that shopping, though, always involves choice. It might involve social interaction. It might involve consumption, but it's always involving choice. So that's why our experiments attempt to isolate the role of choice and control and hold some of these other factors constant. So in an initial experiment, we asked, does choosing help to alleviate sadness above and beyond the benefits of just browsing? So I'll show you what that means. I'll walk you through the procedure here. So what we do is we begin with a baseline measure of the emotions that you're experiencing right now. And we do this because people really differ in their affect intensity. They differ in their willingness to disclose what kind of emotions they're feeling. And we thought there might be enough variation to matter even with the random assignment that we'll actually use. So we take this baseline measure, they drag these sliders on a scale ranging from not at all to very much, and they just rest it. And we record that on a 0 to 100 scale. We don't show them their number because we're going to ask again later. We don't want them to anchor on a particular number. And just a quick note on the measurement of emotion. You might be asking, 2014, are we really still measuring emotion with self-report? And it's important to note that emotions manifest themselves in a number of ways. So there's the subjective experience, there's physiological responses like skin conductance, there's facial reactions. And those are often correlated, but they can be dissociates. So somebody might look sad, but actually be feeling happy, or vice versa. And really, still, the gold standard for the subjective experience is just the self-report. So we use kind of the standard self-report measure. Okay, so we're interested in how people recover from sadness. And some people do walk in actually pretty sad, but some people are pretty happy when they come in. So we actually have to make everybody sad. And it turns out there's a very standard way to do that, which is a film clip from The Champ. Anyone ever see The Champ, a 1979 movie? Very tragic and horrible. So it's this kid, Ricky Schroeder, his dad's a single dad, used to be a boxer, comes back to box, wins the fight, and then dies afterwards. And he's kind of watching this happen. It's terrible. And in fact, people have speculated this might actually be the saddest movie in the world. And they might be right. I used to have a little clip of it. I've stopped doing that. It's just awful. But it works. It does work. And so then we randomly assign participants to become either choosers or browsers. So we make them sad, and then we randomly assign them to different kinds of shopping, one of which we think provides more control. So they are both presented with 12 products. This is all on a screen, by the way. This is all online. Choosers choose 4 that you would hypothetically be willing to buy, and we warned them, you're not actually getting this stuff. So they really had no expectation of leaving with this stuff. Browsers indicate which 4 would be most useful when traveling, and the trick here was that only some were appropriate for travel, so they kind of had less freedom to choose. So here's the choosing task. They had 12 products, and they would click on 4 and drag them over into your shopping cart, the 4 that they would most like to buy. So we have things like headphones that might be good for travel, maybe some things that aren't so good for travel, like a wine decanter. And then the browsers had the same screen where they would click on and drag over 4 that they thought would be good for travel. So there's some key features of these tasks. It takes about the same amount of time, so similar engagement. Exposure to products is held constant, and nobody gets anything. But the tasks presumably differ in their ability to restore a sense of personal control over one's environment. And I think this illustrates itself in 2 ways. One is kind of the variance in choice between choosers and browsers. So this is the percent of participants selecting each product by condition. And you can see that there are 4 that were kind of really popular among browsers: the headphones, the gel mask, the slippers, and the kind of flexible travel keyboard. Nobody thought it would be a good idea to travel with a wine decanter or a marble cheese board, but some people chose that. They would buy that. And so there's actually significantly greater variance among the choosers. We think that's reflecting their greater autonomy that they have during this task. And also we pre-tested these, of course, and we had people complete both in one of 2 orders and say, where did you feel more control? And most people say they felt more control when they were choosing rather than browsing. And then we conclude the experiment, again, asking people, how do you feel right now? Tell us how sad, how depressed, how angry, how happy. We measured their final emotions as well. So what this graph is showing you is basically the increase in sadness, final minus baseline. How much more sad were people when they left than when they came in? And you can see on average these numbers are all above 0 because they had to endure Ricky Schroeder and that awful clip. But the critical thing for us is that the increase was significantly smaller among choosers. Something about that choosing task, exercising more control, helped them heal up from that sadness more quickly. So in experiment 2, we try to demonstrate this relationship in a different way between personal control restoration and sadness, and we see if it extends to other negative emotions, particularly anger. And so anger, we thought, was a nice foil because it's about as negative, about as aversive as sadness typically, but it differs in this control appraisal. Now, it is also known as a low control emotion, just like sadness, but it's a different kind of low control. So sadness is associated with the sense that non-human external forces are kind of in control, hurricanes, disease, things like that. Anger is typically associated with other people are in control. The boss was made to be, somebody cut me off. Other people are unduly influential. That tends to be the anger appraisal, and we start to see the world through that lens. And so we thought what shopping does, restoring personal control over one's environment, would not kind of put out the anger fire. It wouldn't help you think that, wouldn't solve this problem that other people are unduly influential. So we thought that anger might create a problem that shopping is not really well equipped to solve. But we thought sadness was more amenable to that. So we look at both in the following experiment. So I'll walk you through the procedure here. So again, we begin with a baseline measure of current emotions. These were students, 141 students in a lab. This was actually in person. It had to be, for reasons you'll see. And then we randomly assign them to experience anger or sadness. And just like there's a sadness video, there are also anger videos that exist. So you either watch The Champ or you watch a clip from a movie called Cry Freedom, which is basically kind of unarmed, kind of young preteen or teenage protesters getting gunned down at random by opposition forces. It's not fun. It makes people angry pretty reliably. Next, we had everybody make a shopping decision. We gave them 5 lab dollars, kind of monopoly money, and we had them buy kind of they could buy one of 3 office supplies, Post-it notes, pens, or highlighters, or they could choose not to buy and give us their monopoly money. We'd give them $1 back. We didn't give them $5 back because they didn't come in looking to buy Post-it notes. If we gave them a 5 for 5 conversion, everybody would just take the money. So we wanted people to actually make it somewhat difficult, have them think about this. And about 75% of people chose to buy. And interestingly, this did not differ between sadness and anger. They were both pretty likely to buy. The critical thing for us was we wanted to manipulate control somehow. And so we embedded a control manipulation within the shopping task. And we told people that after your choice, the computer is going to draw a random number, 1 to 10. If it's even, you'll just get your choice and go home. If it's odd, we're basically going to throw your choice in the trash can and select one of these on your behalf randomly. But in fact, the trick was that the computer would always just choose whatever you chose for yourself. You didn't know that. So you would always get what you chose, but there was a different route to getting there. So as an example, you choose the pen set. We'll draw a random number. Oh, good news, it's even. You'll get your pen set. Oh, it's odd. Okay, we're just going to ignore your choice. We're going to draw something at random. Oh, you happen to get the pen set. Everybody gets what they get, but we manipulate kind of how much control they feel over the process. And again, so you do that, and then we measure their emotions again, and then we give them whatever their choice was, either the good or the money. And so high external control here, that's basically the odd number where you have to go through 2 of these random number draws. Low external control, that's where you just pull the even number. And we're looking here at how much sadness is left within the sadness conditions, so kind of the focal emotion. And again, we see that sadness is sensitive to these differences in kind of my control over my environment. The more control the environment has, the more sad I am. And again, we're interested in this distinction because this is, in general, what we think shopping does. It moves you from the white bar to the gray bar. But anger was not sensitive to this. It didn't matter what route they took to get their pen set. They were just angry regardless. There was no difference. So in experiment 3, we try a different way to look at this relationship, perhaps a more direct examination of the relationship between personal control restoration, sadness, and anger. And I'll walk through this more briefly because it's not as complicated. So we measure emotions as before, baseline and final. Again, we randomly assign people to view either a sadness-inducing video or anger-inducing video. This time the anger video So the cry freedom, as you might have noticed, was pretty intense in terms of the anger it elicited. This is a bit more mild. So my bodyguard, this is like a bunch of bullies kind of attack a kid and give him a hard time and put him in a trash can, that kind of thing. So it gets people kind of angry. And then we randomly assign people to recall an instance in which they had lower high control over an important situation. So this is just a recall task. We're just purely looking at the effects of control here. So I should note that the prompts guided people to really think about external forces rather than interpersonal power dynamics, because we weren't interested in power over other people. So here's an example from the high external control prompt, and we abbreviated this a bit. So recall an incident in which you did not have any control over a situation important to you. Note that this does not involve a lack of control or lack of power over other people, just a lack of control over your environment. So some people did like health issues. So some things that they could work to kind of recover from more quickly. Other people were like, well, I was just kind of stuck like this until the medication did its work. So we got a lot of similar context, but looking at it through different lenses. So again, sadness was uniquely sensitive to differences in personal control over external forces. So again, the white bar here is the high external control, gray is low external control. We see a similar difference, same direction among the SAD participants. Anger here is a little less intense than the prior experiment, but again, it's not sensitive to this difference in personal control over the environment. We just think it's not solving their problem, which is the fact that other people seem to have undue influence. So, taking all this together, we can come back to the main question, can retail therapy be effective? And we think that the central component of shopping, choice, which we think delivers control, helps to alleviate one negative emotion, which is sadness. So shopping choices seem to boost a sense of personal control, which in turn helps to alleviate sadness. It doesn't appear to extend to anger. Perhaps other kinds of shopping that we didn't look at would help with anger. Maybe shopping where you get control over other people, like winning an eBay auction. That could help. That could help with anger. And so this raises the question, should retail therapy be more common than it is? It seems perhaps outrageous to suggest that people should spend their money to cure their emotions, but again, we showed that it does. You can just do it hypothetically, and there are websites where you can just hypothetically shop, and you can't buy. It's not even an option. So there is stigma surrounding retail therapy that might actually discourage it. So sad people who might benefit from it might not do it because they fear being judged as foolish or judging themselves as foolish. And it's possible that both consumers and retailers would benefit if there was a little less stigma around it. If people kind of understood that there can be some limited benefits of retail therapy. It could be a win-win. But of course, this gets back to that calendar that I put up about intensive retail therapy. If you keep doing this through every ad that you see that makes you sad, if you hop on Amazon, that's not necessarily a good idea. You could build up debt and kind of jeopardize the control that you were trying to restore in the first place. So it has to be applied with caution. But with that, thank you. Yeah.
Does the dollar amount spent influences it at all? So does retail therapy work equally well in the dollar store versus in the high-end mall?
Right. So it's a good question. I mean, our experience, we're closer to a dollar store. The cost was either $0 or $5 lab dollars. Yeah, I mean, possibly at higher amounts, you might get the so-called pain of paying that kicks in and helps to counteract this. But I think it depends on what you can afford. And if you can afford it, if you still feel in control, then it should help. Yeah.
I may have missed this, but did you control in any way for whether subjects in your experiments had an internal or external locus of control to start with?
No, that's a good point. We did not look at kind of internal versus powerful others versus the environment. That could very well moderate this. That's right. That's right. Okay, thanks. We can talk. Well, I'll talk to these people afterwards, but thank you.